Welcome to the Listening Labs. My name is Dr. Richard Halley, and my task today is to share with you three perspectives through which we try to study listening. And so I'd like to start with what listening means to me. To me, listening means being with someone, being in their mental space with them and experiencing that mental space with them, or doing my best to understand their message as they want me to understand it. Maybe a story I could share with you would help. I have a very dear friend in Japan. We've been friends for a very, very long time. And one day I was asking him questions about his childhood days. I was curious because, of course, he grew up during World War II, and I thought that might be a very interesting thing to understand. As I listened to them, they were fascinating, and I suggested to him that maybe he would like to record some of these in Japanese so that his grandchildren could enjoy them. I checked with him and he said no, he hadn't shared these kinds of stories with them, and that might be a fun thing to do. And so we did. We recorded him telling the stories to his grandchildren in Japanese, and I made a CD of it and sent it to his grandchildren, and they tell me yet today that it's a wonderful gift that they have. So that's what listening really is to me, trying to understand somebody else's point of view and sharing their experiences with them. Perhaps a more formal definition, though, would be the internal processing of information that tries to generate an accurate understanding of the intended meaning of the speaker. I need you to pay attention to two words. One is tries and the other is intended meaning. Tries because we can never ever be 100% accurate in terms of our understanding of someone else. It's just not possible. We have too much going on in terms of our own differences and experiences, and so the word try is very important there, that we think in terms of how we try hard, realizing that we probably won't ever get to be perfect. And the other being the intended meaning of the speaker. We want their point of view. We want to know how they look at the world, and that's what it is all about. Listening is really not all that easy to study sometimes, and there's a reason why it's really difficult. And that reason is we cannot watch the process. And the reason we can't watch the process is that everything happens inside the person's head, and we can't get in their head and see what's going on in there. We're left with making assumptions about what our experience tells us helps people understand. That's useful, but it's got its limits. We can look at external behavior of the listener and see whether or not that seems to make sense in relation to whether they're getting that information. And we can ask the speaker if the listener's report is accurate. We are limited there in that, of course, they're using meanings that are slightly different for each other, but we can get an idea that maybe they've got the essence of the idea. And, of course, we can look to see whether or not somebody performs a task that they've been asked to do and been given directions for it. That can be helpful. But none of these lets the person inside the head. Now, we do MRIs and fMRIs and try to study what's going on in there. But even these, we get a screen on a computer screen, and all we can do is interpret what's there. We can't actually follow the message through the person's head. So let's take a look at what we're dealing with. The speaker and the listener cannot have the same meaning. And what I'd like to do here is show you, and I need to show you my screen here. If you would, take a look at this graphic. If you have an idea of what a Venn diagram is, it's just a graphic way of trying to illustrate where the meanings come from. There's the denotative meaning, of course, but everybody brings their own experiences to a word. And those experiences color the meanings in shaded ways, so that your meanings for a particular word are governed by the words that you choose, and those of your listener or the speaker that you're working with are different. So it would have a different shape and look different to you. And your meanings would be slightly off kilter. So if we look at this then overlapping each other, we just make up how much overlap there is. But your task as a listener is, of course, to try to get those to overlap as much as you possibly can. What do we study when we claim that we're trying to study listening? Currently, there are three major approaches to the study of listening that researchers and theorists use. The first is from the spiritual point of view. At least that's a label that you could use for it. What we're talking about here is an exploration of the listener's values. It turns out that some values support quality listening better than others. It's important then to understand that the listener has to care about that person they're listening to. They have to honor the person that they're trying to listen to. And they have to respect that person that they're trying to listen to. Having this point of view means that you will interpret the words much more closely to what the person has in their own mind than you will without that. The other thing is to look at your wants, your listeners' wants. And it's crucial that you want to understand, and that you want to understand for no other reason than just understanding. You don't want to do anything with that information. The decision about what to do about it comes much later. Now, how important this is was demonstrated very well in a large research project that I and Carl Weaver did. We spent about $300,000 doing a series of recordings of speeches and stories and that kind of thing, and we asked students to listen to these and to then take tests on those stories. Well, one of the interesting things that occurred was that we also asked them how interested they were in each one of these pieces. And it turns out that the more they were interested in something, the better their score was on the tests. So that translates very clearly into, you have to want to understand in order to be able to do a good job of listening. The other thing that you can learn from this point of view is that it's crucial that you stay rested, because you can't listen well if you're tired. And you want to eat carefully. I bet you most of you know that if you eat a heavy lunch, the afternoon doesn't go quite as perky as what it would otherwise. And so you need to eat carefully and know that you're thinking about you're going to be listening sometime soon, and so eating carefully is very helpful to that. It also means that we try to prepare ourselves to focus and be clear on the purpose that we have with doing our listening. If we try to stay focused, if we try to stay clear that we're trying to understand and that's all we're trying to do, then that can be very, very helpful. So that's the spiritual point of view. The second point of view is called the cognitive point of view. Here's where we do a lot of work with psychologists and psychiatrists and neurologists. We look at the fMRIs here. We look at the things that people do. We do a lot of experiments. that help us understand how much information somebody gains from a certain kind of information. We learn how to use the information to help us listen, because some of the things that we learn from this point of view are very helpful to help you learn to listen better. You understand how to keep yourself focused and in trying to listen to the other person. And you learn the effects of different listening modes and the importance of staying curious. A curious person is going to get a lot more out of something that they're listening to than someone who's not. And so that's the cognitive point of view. And then there's the skills point of view. And the kinds of things here, focus can be a skill orientation rather than just thinking about how to do it. And so that's one of the things that we study when we're thinking about skills. There's a large number of clarification techniques available. And it turns out that quite often we're not quite sure what somebody is saying. We're a little confused, or we're a little unsure as to what that meaning might be. And so it turns out that there are many ways that you can approach trying to help that person clarify what they mean. The third thing in this area is to learn to handle your own emotions. If you're feeling something strongly while you're trying to listen, if you're feeling angry, if you're feeling delighted and excited about something, it turns out that that impacts how well you can listen. And so it's important to learn to keep yourself calm, and that will help you be able to interpret what the person is saying more effectively. And the last thing in this area is to learn how to respond to the speaker's emotions, because it turns out that if they're not calm, they find it more difficult to explain to you what their message is about. And so we can learn to respond in a way that helps the person calm down and helps the person be an effective presenter of their information. And so that's the 3 points of view. And we hope that we'll be able to share one of those with you. I'd like to leave you with one final idea. And that is that the listener is more powerful than the speaker. You know, we spend a lot of time thinking about powerful speakers. They are very important in much of our cultures. But the truth is that the listener is much more powerful than that speaker. And of course, the reason is the listener can turn it off. The listener can choose not to listen. And when he does so, that's the end of the interaction. And it doesn't matter what the speaker does at that point. If the listener chooses not to listen, then it doesn't work. So keep that in mind. You know, you're a powerful person. We're learning to help you be powerful here, to be the person who can choose what they're going to do and listen well. That's what I have to share at this point in time, and we hope that one of those perspectives will be something that we get to share with you in the future. Thank you very much for listening, and we wish you well in whatever endeavors you're trying